What's about to follow is a conversation with two powerhouse students who I had the pleasure of teaching last year. Jenna Caron and Caroline McMahon have a heightened awareness of current events and politics, and both appreciate how historical context provides a valuable backstory for understanding the present day. Besides excelling in high school, both Caroline and Jenna have been involved with nearby Dartmouth College in its community high school program, where they have taken classes alongside full-time Dartmouth students. Today I'll ask them about the recent New Hampshire primary results, about the overall nomination process, and about being on the Dartmouth campus. I'm Ray Palin, librarian and history teacher at Sunapee Middle High School, and this is a Digital Media Lab podcast. If you're a Sunapee student or a faculty member and would like to use the studios in the lab, it's as simple as reaching out. We can make that happen. Now, here's today's conversation. Girls, thanks for sharing your thoughts today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I'm curious about your impressions of last week's New Hampshire primary. Did it play out pretty much as you guys expected?
I would say Donald Trump had a stronger lead over Nikki Haley than what I was expecting, especially considering New Hampshire sentiment, where we tend to be more independent, and considering we have special laws that aren't in place in a lot of states,
like
such
the
as
undeclared voter?
the undeclared voter law, and just our large independent population. I thought there would be more Nikki Haley support than there was. But even looking at the polls, you could see that it did play out to a certain extent to what we were expecting, as you saw a large amount of independent voters going for Nikki Haley. I want to say around 80% of her voters were independent, which really shows that true hardcore Republicans in the Republican Party is still very dominated by Donald Trump.
Right. Jenna, any thoughts on that?
For me, it was very much disappointed but not surprised, just because he had the lead in the polls, like Caroline was saying. But I was not really surprised at the support for Nikki Haley, but because there were so many other Republican candidates, but since they've dropped out, it doesn't surprise me that a lot of independent voters who can lean right are trying to split the vote and take that away from Trump. So I think if she stays in it, then there could be hope for the eventual nomination.
Do you guys think if DeSantis had not dropped out roughly a week before the New Hampshire primary, do you think that would have benefited Haley, or go ahead?
Are you saying drop out earlier or later?
If he had dropped out, if he had not dropped out prior to the New Hampshire primary vote, do you think Trump, because I think Trump ended up winning by roughly 14% over Haley, do you think DeSantis would have taken some of that vote away from Trump and therefore made the Trump-Haley first, second place a little closer?
I don't believe it would have been too significant, because even though some of DeSantis' support went to Donald Trump, I'd say a good amount of the voter population that had moved away from Donald Trump was anti-Trump. So I think a good amount of his voters went to Nikki Haley, and we're still just seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say at least it might just be a New Hampshire thing where when it's independent voters that are dominating the primary season, I'd say that it's mostly the anti-Trump group, and a good amount of those went for DeSantis. But I don't think, although I'm sure there are some cases where DeSantis votes went to Trump, I'd say a good amount of them went to Haley. What do you think, Jenna?
To tell you the truth, I feel like earlier, before the primary, everything, I thought DeSantis I thought he was more prominent as a Republican candidate, but I think over time, in terms of the DeSantis versus Trump rivalry, I think they kind of broke each other down. And I think that's sort of when Haley was able to sort of step in and make herself known as a candidate. So in terms of if DeSantis dropped out, it would have split the vote. I don't think it would have made that much of a difference either, just because Trump is just such a phenomenon for the Republican Party. Yeah,
I was surprised, like you just said just a second ago, that you felt DeSantis had more of a presence, or was going to have more of a presence in the race.
Yes.
And we actually thought about that last year in class.
We did.
And I was surprised he just never gained the traction. He just never looked comfortable as a candidate. despite seeming to seek the limelight as governor of Florida with his battles against Disney, for example, and his battles against Fauci during COVID. So let's look ahead to the general election. Or actually, let's look ahead to the ongoing primary race. So South Carolina most likely doesn't have that kind of independent group of voters. So do you see Nikki Haley losing badly in her home state to Trump?
I would say before that, just jumping onto the DeSantis issue that both of you were talking about, I'd say a lot of it, unlike Trump, he doesn't have that charisma, which really devastated him. He did come in with a lot of support, but he started to automatically just drop in the polls because he couldn't rival Trump on the populist level that made him so popular.
Definitely.
Because he was a very populist candidate, if we're honest. And he appealed to a new voter base that really hadn't been involved in politics. And looking forward to South Carolina, I think I have a little bit of a different view than you on this, Jenna. I think Nikki Haley might get some support in South Carolina. I don't see her winning the state, especially since if New Hampshire still at over a 10-point difference and a lot of our independent voters are allowed to vote in the Republican primary, Donald Trump support is way too strong for Nikki Haley to take that.
So it's over.
State. As much as
Trump's
I
the
hate
nominee.
to admit it.
Yeah,
The Biden campaign is completely right. The Trump campaign's right. It's over. Trump and Biden, that's going to be our 24 candidates.
And that's pretty close according to the polls right now. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out as support changes and with the current state of the economy.
All right, let me shift gears and let me ask you about your experience at Dartmouth. So what's it like to be sitting in a Dartmouth College classroom as a high school student?
Do you want to tackle this first, or?
It's sort of surreal because almost like being on the outside and applying to college, like, you see an Ivy League school, it's an end-all be-all, I think, for a lot of students all over the country. Like, they want to go to Ivy League schools. They want to be at this high level. And I think I definitely have a different experience with Dartmouth specifically just because I grew up, around Hanover. My mom worked in Leb, so we were always attending, like, Girls' Day and Sports Day. I did basketball camp there for 2 summers. I did, football games. So there's that sort of emotional connection. But I think it almost built confidence for me, I think. I took social justice in the city in the fall. And then for the winter term, I'm taking currently international politics. Wow. And it's I think I thought that I was almost not cut out for a Dartmouth class. Like, not that I didn't think that I have the academic level to be able to do that, but I thought that I didn't have I can't think of the word.
Maturity? I don't know.
I guess. Yeah, maturity. Just because, all of these kids are 19, 20, 21 years old, and I was in there as a 17-year-old, like, okay.
But you're killing it.
Yeah, essentially.
What about you, Caroline? What are you saying up there?
I think I've had a somewhat similar experience to you in a few aspects. Going onto campus the first time in the fall
was terrifying.
Yeah, I was a bit intimidated. Once I got into class, I felt more confident. We started off with, it almost felt like just a bit of an advancement from high school. I felt very comfortable with what we were doing.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of what we had done in APUSH with the Cold War, and then eventually applied it later on to our class curriculum, which for me has been 2 Latin American courses. I took Revolution, Reaction, and Reform in the fall, where we looked at U.S. and Latin American Cold War relations and saw a lot of the ways that the U.S. was involved with different revolutions and interfered with government, and how that has led to modern-day disputes and feelings of animosity between the 2 regions. And now I'm taking it's still a government course, but a more history-based course on the Andean region of Latin America, where I've really learned a lot about we do history as well, but more present-day government. So we've looked at Peru, Ecuador, Venezuela, Colombia, and learned a lot about those governments now. And being in an environment with other Dartmouth students and a professor who has a lot of experience in this field of international relations and international politics it's definitely, although it was intimidating at the beginning, it's become very inspiring for me. And I've felt like I was on the same page with a lot of Dartmouth students where I was I was at that level. I think Centipede set me up for that really well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so that was very helpful where I knew what I was going into. I was prepared for all of the work. Being on campus and the resources that are available, whether it's the library or the general knowledge of the professors, has been inspiring. And overall, it's been a great experience that has really enhanced
I think
my senior
definitely
year.
too, is because at least in terms of being prepared, my IR class, the foundational readings was essentially global studies with Kling, and then like APUSH definitely set me up for a lot of like IR concepts, especially the Cold War, and imperialism, like 1890s forward. So it's definitely, Centipede definitely prepared me for success at Centipede. I mean, Dartmouth.
Yeah.
This has been very impressive to listen to you guys talk about college classes on an Ivy League campus. Thanks for doing this conversation. You guys have been great guests. You both have extremely bright futures. This has been a Digital Media Lab podcast. Thanks for listening.